Razor-thin margins in Florida's midterm races as the state braces for recounts.
If you look at Broward County, they have had a horrible history. They're finding votes out of nowhere. And Rick Scott, who won by, it was close, but he won by a comfortable margin. Every couple of hours, it goes down a little bit.
This is widespread incompetence. We still don't know on Friday, after a Tuesday election, how many votes were even cast.
You have to assume that they're doing this just for fraud, to try to steal the election.
President and First Lady have arrived in France ahead of a weekend of ceremonies to commemorate 100 years since the end of World War I.
We have much in common in many ways, perhaps more ways than people would understand.
Devastating wildfires ripping across California with 9 confirmed deaths.
Protesters turned out to protest in support of Mueller investigation and against the firing of their new idol, Jeff Sessions.
Mueller was not Senate confirmed. So he's doing a report. He wasn't Senate confirmed. Whitaker was Senate confirmed.
How's this for a surprise, huh?
I thought last weekend we were here, we were saying, Tuesday's the election, big election. And that's when everyone's going to count the votes. That's when it's going to be it's all going down on Tuesday.
And it's still happening, Ed.
Here we are Saturday. It's still
got some
but it's shame on us. Remember the Washington Post last Sunday? Fresh verdict to be rendered on the president. And they said, president's agenda at center of fight. Well, I think if the verdict came in, he did pretty well.
We did, and shame on us for thinking that election night is election night. We've seen plenty of times before, especially in Florida and especially in this place.
They're having issues in Florida?
Just a few. Yeah,
and
they're still finding ballots from 2000.
They've only had 18 years to figure this out.
My goodness.
All right, we begin with a Fox News alert. It's a showdown in the Sunshine State as we approach the deadline to turn in the final vote tally in Florida.
This as new questions surface about top Broward County election officials and what they're doing with provisional ballots.
Doug McElway is live in Broward County with the latest. Doug.
Good morning.
Good morning, Katie. Good morning to you all. Let me just get started here, bring you up to date on what the latest vote tallies are right now. Turning to the Florida Senate race right now, Rick Scott has 50.1% of the vote to Democrat Bill Nelson's 49.9%. Only 0.2% difference separates them right now. In the governor's race, Ron DeSantis has 49.6% to Andrew Gillum, the mayor of Tallahassee's 49.2% there. An important note, there's been a small victory for Rick Scott right now. Judges in Palm Beach County have sided with Florida Governor Rick Scott, ordering them to turn over all duplicate and undercounted and overcounted ballots by 10 a.m. today. Meantime, Scott and Nelson, as you can well understand, are going at it tooth and nail. Both of them desperately, understandably, want to win this election.
Clearly, Rick Scott is trying to stop all the votes from being counted, and he's impeding the democratic process. We believe when every legal ballot is counted, we'll win this election.
I'm so disappointed in Bill Nelson. A career politician, has been there forever, and all he's doing now is he's hired Hillary Clinton's lawyer to say, and his lawyer said it, I'm here to win this election, not a fair election, not make sure all the ballots are cast. I'm here to win this election.
And now to another central figure in this drama, aside from the candidates themselves. We're talking about Brenda Snipes, the supervisor of elections here in Broward County. She has a history of what many people believe is incompetence. Just a few examples of that. In 2001, she falsely accused the U.S. mail of losing 58,000 ballots. It turns out that only 6,000 of them were missing. And then the Saturday before the election, she turned over 2,400 ballots to the U.S. Postal Service, but it was after all the mail carriers had gone home from work. Then in 2016, when opponents of Debbie Wasserman Schultz asked for an examination of all the ballots, it turns out that Brenda Snipes had destroyed all of them, keeping only computerized records but not the originals themselves. That was a violation of state law. Broward County voters don't really seem to care about that. They have re-elected Brenda Snipes to office in 2008 to a 4-year term, 2012 to another 4-year term, and 2016 to yet another 4-year term. We saw protesters out here yesterday. We expect them to return as we face several deadlines, and we'll have more on that as this day progresses. Back to you.
We'll be getting back to you all morning. Doug McElway, thanks for that live report.
You know, I mean, it just feels like no one knows what's going on in Broward County. You've seen multiple legal challenges. Why so late? Which ones are they legitimate or not? We're talking tens of thousands of votes. You've seen Rick Scott's campaign win a couple of quick stays to get clarity on what's actually happening in the process, but almost utter confusion, and the lawyers are descending and trying to find votes.
Well, Marco Rubio, the senator from Florida, has been sounding the alarm on this, and he is not someone who goes over the top on issues. True. So he must be very serious about what's going on. He talked about yesterday this idea that there's this video showing ballots being transported in private vehicles, wondering if people are going to ask about where those ballots were distributed or what the chain of command was in the custody of those ballots. Yeah. Brenda Snipes has been accused of a number of things throughout the years, including destroying ballots. She was convicted of doing that a couple of years ago. So there are a lot of questions, not just about incompetency, but about what the intent is here as well.
To your point, just yesterday, days after the votes were supposed to be counted, we keep hearing, count all the votes. Okay, let's count Tuesday, Wednesday,
Florida
Thursday.
law says they should have been counted by Tuesday.
Figure this out, guys.
So yesterday, Friday, there were still Ryder trucks pulling up in that election office in Broward County, coming and going. And people were filming this, posting it on social media, saying, what is being put in these trucks? What is happening? Are ballots appearing? Are they disappearing? And that's why the president, before he left for France, he was at the White House and he told reporters, this is getting ridiculous. Watch.
What's going on in Florida is a disgrace. Go down and see what happened over the last period of time, 10 years. Take a look at Broward County. Take a look at the total dishonesty of what happened with respect to Broward County. Broward County, just press Broward County /election. There's a lot of dishonesty.
Okay, there are a lot of characters here. Doug McKelway mentioned Brenda Snipes, who's in charge, the county supervisor of elections there in Broward County. We'll be talking about her all morning. Go ahead, Joe.
But she's admitted that non-citizens vote in Broward County. Right. They won't purge the voter rolls. They've had trouble with destruction of ballots. 1,000 votes not counted. They found a week after the election in 2012. She gets reelected in this Democratic complex of Broward County. How can it not lead you to a suspicion or a sense that either she's in the tank or totally incompetent? And you see it time and time again. Other big counties in Florida, they can deliver the vote, tons of provisional ballots, mail-in ballots, early ballots. They can figure it out. In this county, they can't. Why? And that's what raises eyebrows for
the other point I want to make, though, quickly, is on the Democratic side of this. You heard Senator Rick Scott, who is obviously the Republican nominee for Senate. He believes he's won that race. He's waiting for all of this to be certified. He said Hillary Clinton's lawyer has descended upon. Who's he talking about? Mark Elias.
I'm sure it's just a coincidence.
Mark Elias represented Hillary Clinton in the DNC in the 2016 campaign. What did he do, among other things? He helped purchase the dossier. He gave the money to Fusion GPS on behalf of the DNC and the Clinton campaign. Okay, so he does that in 2016. That's under the microscope still today. What's he doing now? He runs down to Florida to try to win this for Bill Nelson.
Well, another senator who has had some serious concerns about what's going on in Florida, Senator Lindsey Graham. He was on Hannity last night. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
When it comes to counting votes and confirming judges, there's nothing Democrats won't do to win. They tried to destroy Brett Kavanaugh. It didn't work. They're trying to steal this election. It's not going to work. And I can't wait to get back to work and make sure we put men and women on the judiciary who actually will follow the law. The law means nothing to liberal Democrats. It's all about outcome, and they're not going to win.
Lindsey,
they didn't destroy Kavanaugh, and they're not going to screw Rick Scott. The 2018 cycle is going to be remembered for liberal Democrats doing whatever it takes when it comes to judges and votes to win. The law be damned.
Think about the governor of Wisconsin, who's a Republican, obviously, Scott Walker. He lost by a very small margin on election night. He conceded, as did Andrew Gillum in Florida, and yet he never backed off, even though it's a very small margin, and he's the governor of a state. Scott Walker could have said, hey, let's check this, let's do this. He just said, you know what, I lost.
I was talking to an election official who used to work in DOJ last night about this story, and she was telling me that the Senate actually has a serious interest here because of, obviously, it's a U.S. Senate seat, and we may see a lawsuit coming out of one of those committees against these local jurisdictions to ensure that things are being done properly.
There's a report out in 2016 by Fair Vote looking at all the recounts since 2000. There have been 27 recounts, all Democratic wins. Just saying. And the guy like Mark Elias, he was also, we're going to have Norm Coleman on the program. Yeah. He stole the election for Al Franken.
Well, alleged.
And that's innocent. Alleged from one side of the, you know.
So we'll stay on top of Florida all morning long, but quickly we need to get over to France.
That's right.
Overseas. That's where the president woke up today. He just had this bilateral meeting with President Macron of France. The president, when he landed in France, was quite upset about this proposal from Macron to set up a European military.
Yeah, Macron said yesterday, quote,
on the radio,
we have to protect ourselves with respect to China, Russia, and even the United States. And as you watched President Trump sitting down with the president of France this morning, you could see that he was visibly not content with the current
Tense
situation.
is a kind word. So the president's going over there for the 100th anniversary of Armistice Day, the end of World War I, right? And we're going to be at a historic battlefields, burial sites there, honoring the dead of that war. On the way there, on a radio interview, Emmanuel Macron floats the idea of a European military because of America's reluctance to just go along with NATO in every way it's been done before. Well, the president lands and has this to say to Emmanuel Macron when he arrives in Europe.
This was a tweet.
President Macron of France has just suggested that Europe build its own military in order to protect itself from the U.S., China, and Russia. Very insulting, but perhaps Europe should first pay its fair share of NATO, which the U.S. subsidizes greatly.
Can I just make the point that when President Trump dared to ask NATO as a partner to pay more of their fair share against to fight against adversaries like Russia and China, everybody freaked out like this was the end of the world.
Exactly.
And yet you have Emmanuel Macron, an ally, suggesting that they need a military against the U.S., not in partnership with, but against, and yet the outrage is not at the same level.
Well, and this morning, quickly, when President Trump actually sat down with President Macron, very interesting to read the body language. It was tense at first, but then President Trump was very diplomatic, from what I saw, and Macron was saying he makes a fair point about NATO. We need to pay more of our fair share. So the French and others in Europe are getting the message from President Trump, whether the media wants to admit it or not.
And I'm just laughing at that idea of a European army. I'm sure it'll be a real tough one.
All right, well.
Just bringing the heat.
Okay, you just upset a lot of
I don't care.
Turning now to some of your headlines. We begin with the Fox News alert. At least 9 people are dead as 3 massive wildfires burn out of control across California. The Northern Camp Fire is scorching over 90,000 acres, becoming the state's most destructive wildfire in a century. It's now feared a malfunctioning power line caused the inferno. This as 2 wildfires rage in Southern California, forcing over 95,000 people to evacuate. The president threatening overnight to cut off federal aid if the state doesn't find a solution. And in another tragic event in California, the gunman accused of opening fire at a bar that killed 12 people was posting to social media before and during the horrific attack. In a long writing in one post in part, "Yeah, I'm insane, but the only thing you people do after these shootings is hopes and prayers." Police have been called to the Marine veterans' home in the past for domestic disputes. Wow. Those are your headlines.
Terrible tragedy.
Yeah, it is. All right. Well, ICE says he should have been deported a year ago. Now this illegal immigrant is wanted for triple murder.
Plus, you just saw how Florida is now facing, yet again, election chaos and a potential recount or recounts. But our next guest says the legal firms leading the left's charge to take back the election got some long ties to Democrats. Mark Elias. More on that coming up. First Lady Melania Trump arriving at the Elysee Palace, obviously in France. She was greeted by the First Lady, Mrs. Macron. This is part of the president's visit, of course, celebrating the 100th anniversary of the Armistice, the end of World War I. We're going to be going back there live throughout the morning as this all plays out, Katie.
All right. Well, now over to the Sunshine State Showdown, where the governor and Senate races both facing a possible recount. And it turns out that in the Senate race, the man leading the recount charge to help keep Democrat Bill Nelson in office is a Clinton lawyer tied to the anti-Trump dossier.
Here with details, Luke Rosiak. He's an investigative reporter for the Daily Caller. Good morning, Luke.
Good morning.
Well, so I find this fascinating because the Democrats just sort of said, hey, we want to count all the votes. We're going to send this lawyer. Didn't mention this past controversy.
Yeah, I mean, this is really the whole gang of infamous election riggers from 2016, getting the gang back together for one last caper. You've got Debbie Wasserman Schultz, you've got Mark Elias, and Brenda Snipes. And Mark Elias is really the common denominator with every 2016 election scandal that we saw. People don't really talk about this, but he was the general counsel for both the Clinton campaign and the DNC before Clinton was the nominee. And that really gets to the heart of what they did to Bernie Sanders. Is here they were supposed to be running a neutral primary, and they were operating as an adjunct of Clinton's campaign in Brooklyn. And Mark Elias was basically the guy that brought them together. And he had actually laundered money for them, essentially, because when they were doing something super sketchy that they wanted to hide from the Federal Election Commission, they would pay his law firm, but it wasn't for legal work. He would turn around, and then he hired Fusion GPS, and they paid the family of a DOJ official, and he
because the DNC was supposed to be neutral, obviously, in the primary.
Right. I mean, so these people are election riggers, and they screw over Democrats as well as Republicans. I mean, that's how bad it is. And they did it to Bernie Sanders, and down in Broward County, they did it to Wasserman Schultz's Democratic opponent Tim Canova as well. And that's where you've got Brenda Snipes. She illegally destroyed ballots for this guy. So these guys are really Mark Elias and this whole crew. I mean, they're really Machiavellian operators. I mean, it all comes down to him. He's the one whose law firm hired CrowdStrike with the DNC hack. They did Fusion GPS, started the Russia thing. It all comes down to him, and he's going to do whatever he can get away with. And there's nowhere in the country he can get away with more than Broward County.
Well, President Trump is paying close attention to this. He tweeted, as soon as Democrats sent their best election-stealing lawyer, Mark Elias, to Broward County, they miraculously started finding Democrat votes. Don't worry, Florida. I am sending much better lawyers to expose the fraud. So what kind of lawyers is he talking about, and is the Scott campaign prepared for this fight?
Well, I don't think it really comes down to the lawyers so much as can you trust the election supervisor. And Broward County really is the most corrupt place in the U.S. I mean, you've got their elected representatives are Debbie Wasserman Schultz, whose own party hates her for stealing the election from Bernie Sanders. You've got Alcee Hastings, who was kicked out as a federal judge for taking bribes. You've got Brenda Snipes. Even their sheriff was, remember, the coward of Broward, whose people ran away when there was a school shooting and lied about it. So this is a deeply corrupt place. And at the end of the day, I mean, the question is, do you just have to take the word of Brenda Snipes? And this is a woman who 12 times has been caught being wildly corrupt or completely negligent.
Real quick, Luke, real quick, I hate to interrupt, but my understanding is that she was appointed by a Republican, Jeb Bush, and Governor Scott has been governor now for 2 terms and could have tried to push her out or reform it. So in fairness, have the Republicans been asleep at the switch in Florida and not done anything about this?
Well, yes and no. I mean, she's an elected position. She runs as a Democrat, and she's elected. But the judges have repeatedly found her violating the law, and Rick Scott and Pam Bondi could have and probably should have criminally prosecuted her before, because these are serial riggers, and they got away with it before, and they're going to go on to rig again.
All right, Luke Groziak.
Thanks, Luke. Appreciate it.
Coming up, other elections still not settled days after Election Day. It's also the future of Georgia and Arizona. They're hanging in the balance. We'll have an update next.
And why isn't anyone talking about the huge number of evangelical women who supported President Trump in midterms? We're going to talk about it up next.
Good morning again. Some quick headlines. Democrat Stacey Abrams is buying TV ads in hopes of a runoff election for the Georgia governor race. Abrams is fighting with Republican Brian Kemp over thousands of votes that have yet to be counted. Kemp's team calling out Abrams' refusal to concede as a quote-unquote desperate ploy to steal the election. And in another uncalled race, Democrat Kyrsten Sinema maintains a slight lead in a very tight Senate contest out in Arizona. Sinema leading Republican Martha McSally by some 20,000 votes, but there are more than 350,000 votes still to be counted statewide. Wow. Katie?
All right, well, Democrats in the media are celebrating suburban women for turning on President Trump.
Many local districts across the country rejected your midterm message, particularly suburban women.
Fantastic.
Suburban women voters.
Women saw what happened in 2016, and they stepped up themselves.
I think the Northeast is lost for the Republicans because of women.
Women. Bravo to the women. Republicans lost women. That should worry every Republican candidate in 2020.
But where's all the coverage of evangelical women? Exit polling revealing that 74% are somewhat or strongly supporting the president.
Here to react is host of CBN's Faith Nation, Jenna Browder. Jenna, thanks so much for being here.
Good morning. Great to see you guys.
All right, so tell us about why evangelical women are voting for President Trump in these elections, and why is it that they're being ignored by the media?
Yeah, well, these polls, they really come as no surprise. Evangelical women I talk to, they support President Trump for a lot of reasons, and policy is chief among them. It's the Supreme Court, it's Israel, it's his stance on life. And the other thing is that many evangelicals, women will tell you that they believe that God chose President Trump to be in office, and they believe that he uses imperfect people for his perfect will. And we were just with President Trump about a week before the midterms, flying with him on Air Force One, and got to interview him. And I can tell you this runs both ways. He has a deep understanding, a deep appreciation for evangelicals in return.
Jenna, why does the so-called mainstream, why do they treat women as a monolith? This idea that women all vote one way, men all vote one way. Why the inability to understand that women think independently and have political views, so do men? Can they ever get past that, or will it always just be a chunk?
Yeah, it's a great point, Pete. Women and evangelical women are dynamic voters. They vote on multiple issues, and I think when it comes to the media, you really see a lack of diversity in a lot of newsrooms across the country, and you get non-evangelicals and people who don't understand evangelicals covering evangelical women, and there's a huge disconnect there and a huge lack of understanding.
Well, it's not just evangelical women who are supporting President Trump's agenda and the candidates that he's supported. 77% of evangelicals voted for GOP candidates in the midterms. 17% voted for Democrats. So as you mentioned, Jenna, there are a number of things that evangelicals are happy about with the president fulfilling some of his promises. But going forward into 2020, which we know that race has already started, how do you see this playing out on the issues for evangelical voters?
Yeah, I think the White House has to really be concerned about those women who are kind of on the fence for President Trump. Look, they voted for him in 2016 because they didn't probably like the alternative, Hillary Clinton. But 2020 could be a totally different story, Katie, if the Democrats put out a stronger candidate. And they have to worry about these women because they got 81% of the white evangelical vote in 2016. If that dips below that in 2020 to say even 79%, it could cost President Trump the White House.
Jenna, you mentioned that the liberal media doesn't understand the evangelical voter. A little bit more. What don't they understand?
I think it's a difference of worldview, Pete, and it's a difference of just not understanding a lot of the things that are really important to them. And I will say this is maybe a bit controversial and not politically correct to say in today's Me Too era, but a lot of evangelical women, they like President Trump and the strength that he projects. And we're not talking about strength in a bullying kind of way at all, but strength when it comes to leadership. They like that he is standing up to this PC culture. They like that he is questioning some of the conventional wisdom of the day. And there's a lack of that among some men and just a lot of male shaming that's out there, quite frankly. And this is refreshing to see President Trump, for them, stand up to all of this.
All right. Well, Jenna, thank you very much. We appreciate your perspective.
Appreciate it.
Thank you both.
All right, well, we move on to a Fox News alert. Insane images coming out of California, where wildfires have torched tens of thousands of acres. This morning, we may know the cause behind one of the most destructive fires.
Plus, former FBI Director James Comey slammed Hillary Clinton for sharing sensitive information with using a private email server. But it turns out he may have done the exact same thing.
Well, it was insensitive to taxpayers, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And we're celebrating the U.S. Marine Corps' 243rd birthday. Coming up next, a pretty secure place this morning, thankfully. We are back with a Fox News alert. At least 9 people are dead as 3 massive wildfires burn out of control across California. The Camp Fire scorching over 90,000 acres in Northern California.
It's really remarkable. In Southern California, 2 raging wildfires forcing over 250,000 evacuations. Actor Martin Sheen was among those in Malibu forced to leave. Here's what he said.
This is the worst one I've seen. We've been here since 1970 in Malibu, and we've been through a couple of them, but I've never seen one like this with this intensity. For this long.
Well, our meteorologist Rick Reichmuth joins us live now. Rick, will they see any relief soon? What does it look like?
Yeah, not really at all, unfortunately. In fact, City of Malibu yesterday putting out a tweet saying the entire city had evacuated. So when you think about it, and that's just to the west of the LA area, 2 big fire complexes going on, one in Northern California and then the one that's down around the Malibu area. One in Northern California, we still have the fire danger going on today. That fire went from 0 to 90,000 acres in about 36 hours. The growth of that is really incredible. And as of yesterday night, 6,300 structures had been burned already. Imagine to go from no fire at all to 6,300 structures burned right away. Take a look at some video that's coming out of NOAA, coming from NOAA. They're able to take satellite image, overlay some infrared heat, and you get an idea of just what it looks like. You can see that fire across Northern California is causing incredible breathing conditions and air conditions across Northern California, including San Francisco. And then you see that plume of smoke there that's just to the west of LA. That is the Woolsey fire that is down across Southern California. Both fires burning right now. Wind conditions throughout the day today are going to be bad again. In this afternoon, they pick back up. We'll see some winds over 60 miles an hour, Northern and Southern California. Southern California today, maybe a little bit of a break. Tonight, it increases. Today, during the day, Northern California, bad. Tonight, it decreases a little bit. So we'll flip-flop. That said, the next number of days remaining bad. And obviously, the drought continues across all the West. And that's the overlying problem that we have there. Guys?
Wow.
All right.
Thanks, Rick.
Thanks a lot.
Well, the president weighed in on this overnight. He tweeted, "There's no reason for these massive, deadly, and costly forest fires in California, except that forest management is so poor. Billions of dollars are given each year with so many lives lost, all because of gross mismanagement of the forests. Remedy now or no more federal payments." So, president weighing in there.
I interviewed Ryan Zinke, the Interior Secretary, a few weeks back, and he was talking about forest management and how critical it is to deal with. So it's something the president's been on. He also, we should note, over the last 24 hours, the president signed a federal disaster declaration to make sure California gets the funds and the resources it needs from the federal government. So that's important as well to know.
Yeah,
that's right.
It goes. Lots of people being evacuated and firefighters doing their best to get people out safely.
God bless them.
Absolutely tragic. Turning now to some other headlines. ICE is slamming a sanctuary county for releasing an illegal immigrant who is now charged with triple murder. Luis Perez is accused of shooting 3 people in Missouri. ICE reportedly made a request to detain and deport him to Mexico. Officials in Middlesex County, New Jersey claim Perez did not fit the requirements for them to turn him over to ICE. And Amazon Echo could be key to cracking a double homicide case. A judge in New Hampshire is ordering Amazon to produce recordings that may have captured the moments leading up to the stabbing deaths of 2 women. A spokesperson for Amazon says it will not release customer information without, quote unquote, legal demand properly served to them. The suspect, Timothy Verrill, has pleaded not guilty to the murders in 2017. And fired FBI Director James Comey, remember him? He reportedly used his private email account, we're now learning, for sensitive government business. The New York Post reporting Comey used his Gmail account hundreds of times, and at least 7 of those messages were deemed so sensitive that the Justice Department would not release them. Comey has claimed he only used his private account for, quote unquote, incidental purposes and never sent anything classified. Interesting, since he was overseeing the Clinton matter. And an American hero makes a Veterans Day celebration extra special for his younger siblings.
Tanner is my hero because he's in the Marines.
Well, Marine Tanner Dutton surprising Gianna and Landon at a school event honoring Veterans Day in Colorado. A wonderful moment indeed, and a chance for us to talk a little bit more about the Marines, Pete.
That's right, Ed. Thanks a lot. Well, since before our country's founder in 1775, the U.S. Marine Corps have served with honor to protect the America's rights and our freedom.
And today it is our honor to celebrate them as the U.S. Marine Corps turns 243 years old.
Yes, here to help us do the honors, Lieutenant Colonel Ivan Monclova, commanding officer of the 1st Marine Corps. It's actually Colonel, it's a good correction, district. And then we got Sergeant Major Jason Wolkin here as well as Sergeant Kira Rodriguez. Thank you all for joining us. I recognize the rank. The prompter said Lieutenant Colonel. I correct where I can.
It's okay.
Colonel, talk to us about this 243rd Marine Corps.
So every year we pause for a moment and think about what it means to us to be Marines. This is an opportunity where we think about our founding, pause, recommit ourselves to honor, courage, and commitment. And so it's a great time just to step back from the grind of daily life and remember why we do what we do.
Absolutely. I mean, Sergeant Major, I see a Purple Heart here. I know you've been in many theaters, as have you, and as have many of you. That service, a day like today, what does it make you think about?
It makes me reflect back on all those who have died for this country. And, you know, we take time to pause, like the Colonel said, to reflect back on that.
We are very grateful for everything that you've done for the country, and we know that there is a tradition of the oldest and the youngest Marine to cut the cake. So we will allow you to continue with that tradition today as we get started here.
So the whole piece that we do here is the oldest goes first. He'll take a bite and he'll pass it to the youngest, which is Sergeant Rodriguez. So Sergeant Major Wolkin, it was 1975.
Who never said that you can't have cake for breakfast?
That's right.
There we go.
And I think last year, Colonel, I made the mistake of cutting the cake myself. Or maybe that was a different...
No, I cut it.
You did? Okay.
I think we all dove in and we all started eating.
Marine Corps wouldn't make that mistake. It might have been another service as well. Sergeant, what does it mean to be a Marine to you?
To myself, it means not only just standing for the individuals who have been a Marine before me, but challenging myself on a daily basis, becoming better than I was yesterday, as well as helping everyone around me become better than their yesterday.
Very cool. So wait, what are you supposed to do next? You haven't done anything yet. Okay.
And then we'll pass the next piece, and he'll pass it to the youngest Marine as a symbol of passing the traditions of the Marine Corps from the oldest to the youngest.
Very cool. What kind of cake is this?
It looks like a cherry.
It looks like cherry. I see. Looks like a giant donut cake.
So anybody watching today, or kids who are watching today, what would be your message to them if they want to join the Marine Corps, or if they're inspired by your message?
So if you want to have a purpose in life and be useful, you need to figure out a way to do that. And the United States Marine Corps is a great way to know that you're going to live a life of purpose and have use.
All right. Well,
Amen.
Happy birthday.
243 years. Happy birthday to the U.S. Marine Corps.
Thank you very much. Appreciate
Colonel, Sergeant Major, Sergeant, all of you, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Really appreciate it.
Thank you
Great
very much.
Stuff. All right, well, the left up in arms after President Trump names Matt Whitaker as acting Attorney General to replace Jeff Sessions. But our next guest, a former DOJ official, says any outrage, well, it's overblown, and he's going to explain it next.
Plus, Dan Bongino, Alan Dershowitz, and Kayleigh McEnany all here live coming up.
Hopefully the Marines will stick around, too.
There's plenty of cake.